Sagittarius. What's coming has never happened before. God is ready to flood you with abundance. When the light calls you by name, Sagittarius, take a breath. Something is shifting in the unseen, the kind of shift that doesn't ask for your permission, only your presence. You didn't stumble upon this moment. You were summoned. Perhaps you've been feeling it lately. A sense that your path no longer fits the soles of your feet, that the fire within you wants to move in a direction no map has marked. This isn't just a restless phase. It's a divine recall to the sacred adventure your soul was always meant to live. In this video, we will walk through a spiritual doorway together. One that doesn't promise ease but does promise truth. If you've ever felt like you were born to experience life beyond surface-level survival, if you've sensed, even silently, that your story carries a celestial code, then stay. You are not here to be ordinary. You are the one born to carry the torch when the sky turns dark. And right now, a new constellation is beginning to rise with your name written in its flame. So take a moment, light a candle, soften your heart. And if something in this touches you, please like, share, or subscribe to help keep the light spreading. You are not alone. This is only the beginning. Gate 1: the sacred collapse. When the ground beneath you disappears. Sagittarius, there comes a moment on every spiritual journey when the compass no longer points north. Not because you've lost your way, but because the map you were following was never meant to carry you this far. You, more than most, were born to outgrow boundaries, to leap over fences others never dare to question. But what happens when the horizon itself begins to blur? When the dreams you held tightly begin to fall apart, not from failure, but from spiritual expiration? You are walking through such a moment now. Perhaps you've been feeling it in ways that are hard to name. The silence that has replaced once loving voices. The door that wouldn't open no matter how many times you knocked. The restless ache in your chest at night, like your soul is pacing the floor of your life, searching for something that no longer lives there. These are not coincidences. This is the collapse, the sacred unraveling that only happens to souls strong enough to rebuild themselves from truth, not tradition. You see, Sagittarius, you are not being punished. You are being awakened. The universe, in its strange mercy, will sometimes remove every comfort that numbed your spirit. It will take away the relationships that kept you safe but stagnant. It will close the paths that made sense on paper, but made you feel smaller with each passing day. Because your soul signed a different contract, the one that doesn't end in comfort, but in liberation. And liberation often begins in loss. This isn't the kind of grief people talk about easily. It's not just about losing someone or something. It's the kind of grief that comes from losing the version of yourself you tried so hard to keep alive. The one who was agreeable, successful, easy to understand. But underneath that version was always someone wilder, more tender, more true. Someone who couldn't fit into the frame society handed you. Someone who's been knocking from the inside for years, waiting for the collapse to finally break the lock. And now it has. Maybe you've found yourself questioning everything. The job you thought would fulfill you now feels like a cage. The relationship that once felt like destiny now feels like a weight. Even the dreams you used to chase with fire have gone cold. You're not lazy. You're not confused. You're just done pretending. The curtain has fallen. The lights are out. And what remains is the silence that holds only one voice. Your own. This is where the sacred begins. You've always had a fire inside you, Sagittarius. But somewhere along the way, you were told to dim it. Maybe you were taught that being too free was dangerous. That dreaming too big would end in disappointment. That questioning too much would make others uncomfortable. So you learned to contain your passion, to dress it in practicality, to explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. But the fire never left. It just waited. And now, as the walls fall, that flame is stretching again, hungry to touch the edges of your true calling. Do not mistake the collapse for failure. It is the most honest mirror life can offer. It shows you what was never real to begin with. The friend who only stayed when you played small. The job that praised your productivity but drained your soul. The identity you wore like armor, but which slowly suffocated your spirit. All of it is dissolving. And though it hurts, you are being given something precious in return: clarity. And with clarity comes the most terrifying, liberating truth. You can no longer go back. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unfeel what you now feel. The moment you touched the edge of your real self, even for a second, you outgrew everything built to contain who you used to be. So what do you do when there's no going back? You go forward. Not with a plan. Not with certainty. But with presence. Sagittarius, you are not here to repeat what others have done. You are here to walk a path no one has walked before you. That means you will often feel lost, misunderstood, even exiled from the places you once called home. But exile is sacred when it leads you back to yourself. Remember, a tree doesn't grow without shedding its bark. A star doesn't shine without burning. And a soul doesn't awaken without falling. Let yourself fall. Fall not into despair, but into the space beneath your old identity. The space where your real wisdom waits. The space where you stop performing and start remembering. Because underneath the story of who you were supposed to be lies the raw, holy truth of who you really are. You are not broken. You are breaking open. There's a difference. And the world needs the version of you that emerges on the other side of this collapse. The version that no longer seeks validation but carries vision. The version that no longer asks, "What should I do?" but instead asks, "What is true for me now?" Sagittarius, you are not here to be liked. You are here to be lit from within. And so, let the world around you shift. Let the roles fall. Let the old titles dissolve. Let the grief flow. Because what is leaving was never the end of your story. It was the weight that kept your wings from unfolding. And what's coming? It isn't a return. It's a rebirth. Not into who you were before the collapse, but into who you were always meant to become. This is the sacred moment you stop surviving and start remembering. Not the path the world laid out for you, but the one written in the stars the day you were born. So breathe. You are not lost. You are being redirected by a compass only your soul can read. And that compass is finally pointing toward truth. Gate 2, the ending was the invitation. What you lost was the gate. Sagittarius, there is a kind of ending that does not come with closure. No final conversation. No explanation wrapped in logic. Only a silence that echoes louder than any goodbye. And in that silence, something inside you quietly breaks, not because you are fragile, but because your soul has just crossed a threshold no one else can see. You've known loss, not just of people or places, but of entire seasons of yourself. Versions of you that gave everything to someone who never truly saw you. Chapters you poured your hope into, only to watch them dissolve without ceremony. And yet, here you are, still walking, still listening, still breathing, even with a heart that remembers what it cost you to get here. Let me say something that perhaps no one has ever dared to say to you before. You did not deserve the endings that came without mercy. The way they left, sudden, cold, unexplained, was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of the soul contracts that had finally expired. Some people were never meant to stay. Some stories were only written for a few chapters, no matter how hard you tried to keep them going. Sagittarius, your fire is ancient. You don't just love, you vision. You see potential where others see problems. You stay long after the light has faded, trying to relight what was already burning out. You give more chances than most hearts know how to hold. And when it ends, when that inevitable fracture comes, it doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your belief in what's real. But here's what you must understand. Just because it ended doesn't mean it failed. Every soul that touched your life, no matter how briefly, was a teacher. Every ending was a mirror. Every closed door a redirection. There is not one person who left you that was meant to stay longer than they did. Even the ones who promised forever. Even the ones you prayed for. And if they walked away while you were still offering them your light, it wasn't rejection. It was divine protection. The universe knows how heavy your mission is. It knows you cannot carry the energy of the past into the temple of your future. And so it removes, not to harm but to refine. You weren't abandoned. You were redirected. You weren't forgotten. You were freed. And the grief you've carried, not just this year but maybe for lifetimes, was never a sign of weakness. It was the depth of your devotion. It was the way your soul whispered, "I'm still here." Even when everything around you said leave, let go, move on. But now finally you are ready. Ready to release what no longer returns your energy. Ready to mourn what never got to become what you hoped it could be. Ready to stop asking, "Why did they go?" and start asking, "What was I meant to become after they left?" Because Sagittarius, this was never about holding on to people. It was about becoming the person who no longer abandons themselves just to be held. And maybe no one told you this before, but not every ending needs to make sense to be sacred. Some things are removed before you're ready because your soul was ready before your mind could understand. Some chapters close without punctuation. Some doors close while your hand is still reaching. And yet, even so, it is closed. And the only way forward now is through the grief into the grace. It's okay to cry, to scream, to feel like something in you has died. Because it has. The version of you who waited, who tried harder, who hoped against hope, that version has completed its service. And now, a new version of you is being called forward. One who no longer begs to be chosen. One who no longer trades truth for temporary belonging. One who stands up in the ruins and says, "If this is where it ends, then this is where I begin." Let this be the moment you reclaim what was scattered. Not just your energy but your story. You do not need anyone to validate your pain to know it was real. You do not need to be understood by the one who left to know you were worthy of being loved. Some souls are not meant to walk this path with you, because your light would have burned through their illusions too quickly. Your truth would have required too much honesty. Your depth would have pulled them into waters they were not ready to swim in. So they left. And though it hurt, that departure was the gate. Loss was never your enemy. It was your passage. It didn't come to destroy you. It came to carve space. Space for who you're becoming. For what's arriving. For the truth that is no longer willing to hide behind who you used to be. Sagittarius, your soul knows how to rise. Not just once, but every time. And now is no different. There is a part of you that still aches for what was. That still wonders if they'll come back, if it could be repaired, if the story has one more page. But my love, the story was already complete. It's not unfinished. It's sacredly ended. And now a new chapter is waiting. Not the continuation of what was, but the revelation of what's next. And what's next is not a repeat. It is a resurrection. But you must let it begin. You must stop waiting at closed doors. You must stop offering your magic to those who only wanted mirrors. You must choose the truth even if it comes without applause, even if it means standing alone for a while longer. Because that aloneness is not empty. It's full. Full of the power you've been giving away. Full of the light that's been waiting to return. Full of the clarity that can only come when you stop trying to explain your pain to those who only ever listen with judgment. Sagittarius, endings are not curses. They are callings. And what you lost was not taken from you. It was returned to the universe, so something more aligned could find its way into your life. So breathe, mourn, but don't stop moving. Because what's ahead isn't a repeat of your past. It's the life your soul chose before it ever knew what loss felt like. And that life is calling now. Can you hear it? Gate 3, the soul bond beyond this lifetime. Love that remembers who you really are. Sagittarius, you were never meant for ordinary love. Yours is not the love that simply settles into comfort. Yours is the kind of love that transforms, awakens, and sometimes burns through the illusions others cling to. From a young age, you knew this. You felt it in the way your heart reached across timelines, how certain people felt familiar before they even spoke, how your spirit stirred when their presence entered the room. There is a reason love has never been simple for you. It's because your love does not seek possession. It seeks remembrance. You don't fall in love with appearances. You fall in love with energies, with the sound of someone's silence, with the ache behind their smile, with the way their wounds speak in frequencies only your soul has been trained to hear. That is why you have always loved so deeply, even when the love wasn't returned with the same clarity. And when that sacred connection arrives, whether for a season or a lifetime, it doesn't ask your permission. It floods in like a cosmic memory, awakening something ancient in your bones. The first time you met them, you didn't feel like you were meeting someone new. You felt like you were finally remembering. But here is the paradox Sagittarius knows all too well. Not every soul connection is meant to last forever in form. Some arrive only to catalyze your transformation. Some come to mirror back a forgotten part of your essence. Others are meant to tear you open, so the light you've hidden can finally breathe. And then they leave. When this happens, it is devastating, not just emotionally but cosmically. Feels like the universe played a cruel joke. Like you were shown paradise only to have the door slammed shut before you could step in. But this pain, this unbearable ache of soul separation, is not a punishment. It is the echo of something larger, something far older than this lifetime. Sagittarius, the soul knows when it has met itself in another. No logic can explain it. No timeline can contain it. You may try to dismiss it, to reason it away, to say it was just chemistry or coincidence. But the truth won't leave you alone. You still hear their voice in dreams. Still feel their energy when the room is quiet. Still sense them when no one else is around. Because some connections are not physical, they are coded in light. You didn't imagine it. And you're not crazy for still feeling it. In the Vedas, it is said that when two souls recognize one another from a past life, the heart begins to vibrate in remembrance. That vibration is not desire. It is destiny reminding you of what once was, of what still is beyond form. And you, Sagittarius, as the archer of spirit and seeker of higher truth, were born to hold space for these sacred recognitions, even when the world offers no words for them. But the question that always follows is this: if the connection is so real, why didn't it last? Because not all love is meant to be lived out. Some love is meant to be realized. Some souls are not here to walk with you. They are here to wake you up. They arrive to crack the armor you built to survive. They ignite your fire not to stay warm, but to burn away everything you no longer are. And once their role is complete, they are released not by choice but by soul design. And yet their imprint remains. Not as a wound but as a window. A window into the kind of love your soul has always longed for. The love that sees through your masks. That doesn't need your perfection to stay. That recognizes you beyond time, beyond logic, beyond form. That love is not gone. It is simply continuing its journey in the invisible. And one day, maybe not in this life, you will meet again. Maybe in a different body, a different city, a different sky. But when your eyes meet again, the memory will return. And you'll know, the love never ended. It just moved through dimensions. But what about now? What do you do when your soul still aches for someone who is no longer here? You let the ache become your teacher. You let the absence become the altar. You speak their name in your prayers, not to call them back, but to bless the path they are now on. You choose to believe that even if their chapter in your life is closed, the gift they brought awakens something that will never sleep again. The knowing that you are capable of a love so true, so deep, so divine, that it forever changed the way you see yourself. Sagittarius, this kind of love does not leave you with bitterness. It leaves you with clarity. It reminds you that you are not here to chase love. You are here to become love. To embody the frequency that once mirrored itself through another. To live in such truth that the next soul you meet will not be a lesson, but a partner in flight. And yes, that day will come. The one who matches your frequency. Who doesn't dim your fire but dances with it. Who doesn't run from your depth but anchors into it. Who has done the work, walked through their own collapse, and is now ready. Not just to be loved by you, but to love you back in a way that your soul recognizes as home. But that love can only arrive once you've made peace with what came before. Not by erasing it, but by honoring it. So light a candle for the ones who came and left. For the sacred contracts that were fulfilled in silence. For the hands you once held tightly but had to release. And say thank you. Thank you for reminding me who I am when I love with my whole soul. And then turn your face to the sky. Because Sagittarius, the next great love of your life may not come in fireworks, but in the stillness after. In the knowing that you are no longer searching outside for what already lives within. And in that stillness you will feel it. The love you gave away is returning. But this time it wears your name. Gate 4. The soul awakens through stillness. You were never meant to sleep forever. There is a moment, Sagittarius, when the noise fades. When the striving softens. When your once burning questions no longer scream for answers, but dissolve into a kind of reverent silence. It is not apathy. It is awakening. It is the sacred stillness after the storm. The space your soul has been trying to bring you to for lifetimes. You see, you weren't born just to succeed. You weren't sent here merely to collect experiences or check off milestones. You were born to remember. To pierce through illusion. To awaken. Not just for yourself, but for every soul your light would later touch. And yet, before awakening comes a great forgetting. You had to forget first. Forget your wholeness. Forget your divine origin. Forget the way your inner fire was once inseparable from the breath of the cosmos. That forgetting was necessary, not as punishment but as path. The journey into illusion wasn't your failure. It was your classroom. You had to feel the ache of separation in order to understand the power of reunion. You had to fall asleep to appreciate what it means to truly awaken. And now, dear Sagittarius, the veil is lifting. Not in a grand display. Not in a blinding epiphany. But gently, like the slow rise of morning light over a quiet desert. Subtle. Unmistakable. Holy. Perhaps you've noticed it. A moment of stillness that used to feel like boredom now feels like sanctuary. A conversation that once triggered your defense now invites your compassion. A longing that used to scream for validation now dissolves into a silent trust that the universe has not forgotten you. This is the awakening. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek permission. It comes when the soul is ready, even if the ego still resists. Sagittarius, yours is a restless sign. You're known as the wanderer, the philosopher, the wild spirit who can never quite stay still. But the paradox of your path is this: your greatest revelation will not come on the road. It will come in the silence you've spent your whole life trying to outrun. Because silence is not empty. It is filled with your truth. There in the quiet is where you finally hear the voice beneath all voices. The one that doesn't command but gently remembers. It says, you are not who they told you to be. You are not who you had to become to survive. You are the one who remembers how to see in the dark. And when that voice rises, so does your soul. This kind of awakening is not comfortable. It strips you bare. It dissolves your old defenses. It returns you to your most vulnerable state, the part of you that still believes in the sacred, that still cries during sunsets, that still hopes even when logic has given up. That part of you isn't naive. It's the original part, the ancient flame that was never extinguished, only buried. Now it burns again. You may find yourself weeping for no reason, laughing at things that once made you feel hollow. You may begin to shed people, habits, and environments like skin that no longer fits. You may start hearing whispers in your dreams, noticing signs you once brushed aside. This is not coincidence. This is your soul saying you've arrived. Arrived not at a destination but at a frequency. You are no longer fighting for your place in the world. You are remembering that your place was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be occupied with grace, with presence, with quiet dignity. And here's what they don't tell you about awakening. It can be lonely. Not because you're alone, but because the world you're waking up from was never real. And in that first breath of truth, the illusions you once clung to fall away. You can no longer pretend, no longer perform, no longer numb yourself with distraction or approval. And so, at first it feels like loss, like drifting, like exile from the familiar. But slowly this too transforms. Because what you gain is something no external force can take from you. Inner authority. The kind of authority that doesn't come from knowing everything, but from trusting your alignment. You no longer need to convince others. You no longer need to prove your worth. You simply walk in truth. And truth makes a different sound when it enters a room. It doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't seek control. Simply is. And in its presence, all that is false begins to dissolve. Sagittarius, you were never meant to walk this world asleep. You came with a mission to wake others, yes, but first to wake yourself. And now you are. You are waking up to a kind of peace that doesn't need permission, to a kind of joy that doesn't depend on outcome, to a kind of love that begins in your own reflection. This is not ego. This is essence. And when you live from essence, everything changes. Not all at once, but inevitably. You attract different conversations, different companions, different opportunities, because the energy you now carry is not the energy of striving, but of surrender, not the energy of chasing, but of receiving, not the energy of I must become, but I already am. And from this space the universe responds, not with applause but with alignment. Doors open, not because you forced them, but because they were waiting for the real you to arrive. The healed you, the whole you, the awakened you. So rest now, Sagittarius, not in laziness but in reverence. Rest in the knowing that you are no longer lost because you are no longer running from yourself. The fire you spent your life projecting outward has turned inward, and now it lights your way. This is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning of walking it awake. Conclusion: the light was always yours. Sagittarius, if you are still here, still reading, still feeling, still breathing into this space, then something sacred has already begun inside you. Not a spark of inspiration that flickers and fades, but a steady flame. A light that was never gone, only hidden beneath the noise of expectation, the weight of survival, the longing to be understood in a world that often doesn't know how to hold souls as wild and vast as yours. You have walked through the collapse. You've mourned the endings that never gave you closure. You've loved beyond the edges of logic, held space for soul connections others couldn't see, and finally, you've remembered how to listen to your own silence. That is the path of the awakened archer. The one who doesn't just seek answers but learns how to sit inside the unknown with courage and grace. The one who doesn't just carry fire, but becomes it. And now the journey begins again. But this time from a different center. This time you're not trying to prove anything. This time you're not searching outside yourself for the next sign, the next permission slip, the next validation. This time you are walking as the light. Sagittarius, your path is not meant to look like anyone else's. And your healing will not unfold on a schedule. But what is certain, what has always been certain, is that the universe never forgot you. The storm did not erase your name from the stars. If anything, it carved it deeper. You were written into this world not as a background character, but as a reminder that freedom is sacred, that truth is healing, and that love, real love, always begins within. So if any part of this message touched something ancient inside you, let that be the confirmation your soul has been waiting for. You are not broken. You are breaking through. You are not behind. You are precisely on time. And you are not too much, you were simply never meant to be small. Now go forward. Not in haste but in reverence. Not with a mask but with your real face. Not as someone searching for light, but as someone who finally remembers. You are the light. If this journey moved something within you, share it with a soul who may have forgotten who they are. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is a reminder. And sometimes that reminder is you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being exactly who you are. And thank you for choosing, even in your most silent hours, to keep walking home to yourself.